Welcome to the Virtual Project Management Roundtable panel. I'm Fred Abiero, the Managing Director of Client Solutions and Training at Process IT, and will be the host and moderator for today's webinar. I want to thank each one of you for registering for this event and for being here with us today. And I would also like to thank the entire Process IT team for supporting the efforts that made this webinar possible. We'll have time set aside for Q&A towards the end of the discussion so that the panelists can get to answer some of your questions. For our viewers, there's a question icon at the bottom of your screen that you can use to ask your questions. Then I'll select a few from those during the Q&A session. In today's webinar, we'll be talking to the Director of Digital Experience in PMO at Modernizing Medicine, Bernie Saenz. Bernie has spent many years developing and executing strategies for Fortune 500 companies and tech startups in a variety of industries. So thanks for being with us, Bernie.
Thank you for having me.
We also have Yuset Allam, who is a senior technology executive at Assurant. Yuset's experience has focused on the areas of IT, PMO, agility, and software development lifecycle management in various industry sectors such as mobile, telecommunications, fintech, banking, and retail. It's a lot of diversity there, Yuset. So thanks a lot for being with us as well. You both have a diverse experience in IT, and I appreciate you both being with us. So with that said, I'll get on to the questions. The first one is going to be for you, Bernie. Bernie, with the majority of people now working remote, what are your thoughts when it comes to conducting remote interviews versus on-site interviews?
Yeah, so thank you for having me, Fred. You said it's great to be on the panel with you. I haven't seen you in a while, and thank you for the viewers that are watching today. It's a new normal. If you guys really think about it, remote interviews are not something that is new, but it is a new normal. You have to look at it through a couple of different dimensions. One is, when you think of your employees, you want to protect them in the midst of everything that's going on with COVID. So I am a huge promoter of remote interviews for that purpose. But not only that, but you also have to think about the approach that you take, for the individual themselves. So it's not just about you finding the right candidate, but it's making sure that that candidate also understands the culture of the organization in a way that they cannot really consume by doing these things remotely. And at the same time, making sure that they understand that they're comfortable with the process. So you have to be very upfront with the interviewing process. Try to keep it simple, especially in this new normal. In this new normal, we don't have to be all business-like, right? I think right now we see a lot of, what I love about, the remote experience is that I get to really engage more with not just the business person, but also that personal. So I've learned to, understand, the kids and, the dog and all that good stuff. So it's always good to just also keep it personal as you're doing that interview. Make sure that the candidate feels secure. You got to remember, these candidates are interviewing for a position. They're trying to understand, is this an organization that I would want to work for? So anything that you can do to make sure that that experience is not lost in these remote interviews, it's also something that you have to take into account. The second thing is, I'm huge on video. Video is very important. From an emotional intelligence perspective, that body language, how individuals respond to the questions, the type of hand movements, face expressions. It's also very important for you to make sure that you're getting a good pulse check on the reaction and maybe even prompt questions that might really get that candidate to really, feel satisfied with, make sure that you gave them the right answer, or maybe make sure that you repeat the question to make sure that it's it's comprehended and you're getting the right answer. It gives the candidate the right opportunity. And at the same time, it gives you the opportunity to continue to make sure that you're sharpening that question and that you're getting what you're looking for out of that candidate. So those are just some of the thoughts that I've seen that are prevalent right now.
Just a quick follow-up, Bernie. A lot of times, pre-COVID, when companies were bringing people back for follow-up interviews on site, one of the things they were looking for is personality tests. How do you go about, gauging somebody's personality over, a remote interview? Is there, certain questions that you ask to try and see if there'll be a good personality fit within your teams, or how do you go about that process?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just questions, you have to have certain questions that really intrigue the mindset. You're looking for critical thinking. It also depends on the function and the job description, you know, whether it's a business analyst or as a project manager. And even within those two functions that I just mentioned, there might be some more technical needed skill sets for one or the other based on the type of assignments that they're going to be working on. So I think for me, a lot of situational questions are things that help me to really understand how they think. If I'm looking for a business analyst, for example, I'm going to make sure that they're very detail oriented. So I'm going to be asking questions that are really more open-ended and are going to give me some sort of an answer that really takes me through their critical thinking skills. How do they approach problems? How do they generate solutions? How do they, anticipate any type of potential issues that might occur? From a project management perspective, as good as project management technical skills are, I think one of the things that we miss a lot of times is just that emotional intelligence aspect. I mean, I tell my teams all the time, when it comes to, and I have the 80-20 rule, you can teach project management skills. Sometimes it's a lot tougher to really teach the emotional intelligence, empathy. You know, are they going to really understand how to read body language, how to navigate, through the organization? You know, can they understand the culture? Do they understand the importance of the culture and how it applies to their day-to-day in order to be effective? So depending on the role, depending on the function, the type of initiatives that they're going to be working on, I usually just jive a couple of questions down that I know are going to be thought-provoking, but are going to really get me, a good understanding of that candidate to find out whether that candidate is truly a good fit for the role or not.
Yeah, thanks. Absolutely. Appreciate that very detailed response to that question. You said all companies have had to make adjustments on how they operate after the disruptions caused by COVID-19, as we all know. What are some of the major changes you've had to make on how projects are ran on your teams?
Yeah, so fortunately for us, it hasn't been too much of an impact organizationally. We are a large global scale organization where we have resources deployed in different regions and different parts of the country as well. So a lot of our PMs per se were already doing some of this remote work. We work at an organization where we have remote work policies. A lot of the people was either 100% fully remote or 2 to 3 days a week. So from a PM standpoint, wasn't too much of an impact. We saw it more on partner functions that were used to being on site all the time. So, our development teams, a lot of those were on site. I remember some of those leaders saying, oh my God, how are we gonna manage this now? A lot of the concerns that we saw from the people was, will people continue to be as effective and efficient as they are when they are in the workplace? Are they gonna lose focus? How are we gonna keep them engaged with the goals, with what we're trying to achieve? And I think that the success factor in there is communication. So one of the things that our leadership team did from the moment in which we started facing this COVID situation is we engage on a lot of communication, constant communication with our teams. We are doing weekly calls at different levels from the CEO to the team level, where everybody is continuously refreshing on our strategy, our goals for the quarter, what are we trying to deliver, the value promise that we have to our customers and our clients. So we keep everybody on their feet, in terms of what we're trying to do. And it's not too much of, oh, I'm not there, I'm feeling disconnected. A lot of this is ensure that you're keeping people connected to the strategy, to the work, and also that we're connecting at a personal level, because that's what we get the most when we go to the office. I think is, as Bernie says, that aspect of emotional intelligence that is sometimes overlooked. A lot of the being in the workplace relates to that emotional intelligence and being able to, hey, the factors of, I had lunch with my friend today, or I'm having lunch with this business partner, or I'm having cafecito with this other person, that help you build those interpersonal skills and interpersonal relations that make you feel more engaged and more as part of the company, that when you're virtual becomes a lot harder. Now I think that through Zoom and some of the tools that are out there, we all have learned how to engage virtually. I think we have now massive meetings of 100 plus people, but everybody shares, cameras are on, everybody's seeing one another. You get to joke around either their environment or the background screen that they're putting. something else, or you see suddenly a kid running behind, oh, those are your kids, you know. So you keep that level of engagement and keeping the emotional aspects of connecting, because we're human, we're all about connections, right? So
Right.
you need to keep that in place. And we have been very focused on that. So communication, being connected with people, and ensuring that at the project level, that you're connecting with your team, you know, that they see you, that you see them. Keep that, that's extremely important. And we haven't seen any impact. We have seen continuous of productivity throughout the team. So we're really happy to see that working.
That's great. Sounds like you guys had a head start on the remote setup. That's a
Definitely.
good thing.
Yeah.
Right. So Bernie, and for the viewers, Bernie used to be he's a former South Florida PMI chapter president. So the question that's coming up is a good question for him. Bernie, a PMI survey that was conducted this year revealed that 11.4% of project investments is wasted due to poor project performance. What suggestions do you have for PMO leaders to combat poor performance on their projects?
Great question, Fred. And you know, I'm known for saying these little quotes. And as you ask that question, this one comes to mind, and you know, I'm constantly stressing to my teams: before the ship leaves the dock, we have to make sure that we know where we're going, or we're going to be lost at sea. You know, I think a lot of the times that you have project performance issues, you're starting to see those at the planning stages or the execution stages. And a lot of the times it's really a sign that the initiation phase wasn't properly executed. You know, I think that there are a lot of things that we measure in project management, from key performance indicators, you know, CPI, all these great things. And all those things I think are very important to the project, but really more internal to the project management office. To be quite honest with you, I've been a big believer that, you know, executives don't care about CPI. They don't care about all this project management, you know, metrics. At the end of the day, it's really about, you know, the outcomes and the key results and how you enable the business to really make sure that they actually have some sort of a value that's driven out of that project initiative. So I'm huge on making sure that at the very early stages of the project, during the initiation phase, when we are going to mobilize a particular initiative, that we do a good solid round of evaluation on the business case and those outcomes or key results that are expected from the project. And then you want to make sure that you incorporate those type of metrics or those type of measurements, and that you're constantly looking at them, not only in the planning and the execution stages or post-mortem after you gone live, but you're making sure that those is almost like your guiding star at every step of the way through every single one of the phases of project management. And as you're doing that and evaluating that, you're going to be able to course correct, understand when you're not hitting or when you're maybe not going to get to that particular result early on, so that you can make the right adjustments as you continue to move forward. I think one of the things that you said touched on that is very critical, it's really communication as well. You know, I think a great mentor of mine once told me it's not a matter of assignment, it's a matter of alignment. And you have to make sure, just because we have a project that's approved and resources assigned doesn't really mean that we're all aligned. So I think early in the stages, making sure that that alignment happens before that ship leaves the dock, make sure that everybody kind of understand the objectives very clearly, understand how they play a role into those objectives, how they contribute to getting there, who's on first, who's on second, and make sure that everybody feels a sense of accountability and responsibility for contributing to getting there as a team. And it's not only just the project manager that's responsible for it, but it's a consensus, it's a team effort. Everybody's going to cross that line together, and ultimately that value is going to be derived from that team dynamic, proper communication, and very clear objectives from the very beginning.
That's very good. And I agree with that. Proper communication and objectives, especially in the beginning, where, you know, it's cheaper to make changes in a project as opposed to later in the stage, because the longer you go in a project, the costlier it gets to make changes. So that's a very good example which you provide.
And that's a great point. That's a great point. The cost of change, it's a lot higher later than it is up front. I mean, I've done these evaluations, and you can really, I mean, I've seen projects that could have really been saving millions of dollars if they would have just had the right discussions early on.
Yeah.
Yeah, to add to that, I think that's part of what you see many organizations transforming themselves these days and going more into an agile approach. Uh, that's where the waterfall approach in many cases failed organizations is because it was very command and control from a project management standpoint, and a lot of people does not understand project management best practices, and they see it as bureaucracy and they see it as red tape, and they don't have the willingness to invest the time that is required on the initiation and planning phase. They just want to get to the, you got a team, start developing, start doing something, right? But if you don't have all those fundamentals, if you don't have that evaluation, those metrics that Bernie just touched on, that is a recipe for failure. You have no guidance to start. You don't have a point where you come back and say, am I on the right path or not? And that is through the constant, inspection and the constant revisions that happen in an agile process that enable teams to be more successful as you go through this. And that's why you're seeing a lot of transformations going out there nowadays, especially in the midst of a digital evolution and the world that we live in today.
That's correct. Yeah, thanks for that. You said for adding on to what Bernie said. So good points for you both. You said some PMOs are not used to having their entire team working remotely. We just spoke about how you guys seem to have a head start because you were used to having some teams being 100% remote. What recommendations do you have for project teams that are rapidly trying to create an environment that fosters online collaboration and efficient remote workers?
Yeah, I think there are multiple things in there. First one to me is understand your culture, right? There are cultures that are built that are honestly not conducive of remote work for whatever given reason. So you got to understand that. You got to see that is something that can impact the success of your projects and the way you guys execute or not. And if it can, then what are those things that we can tweak or change to be successful? The other one is, do we have the right tools, right? So do you have the right type of infrastructure, the devices? There are organizations where PMs still have, desktop computers. They don't have laptops and things of that nature. So it makes it more difficult to work remotely. Do you have Zoom video conferencing, or are you using MS Teams? What are you using to collaborate? And is your company conducive of that collaboration even when you're on site, right? Are you the person that have a project team that have a site set up for the team where all discussions are held amongst team members, or are you in an organization where you still do everything through a formal email? You have to get off your desk and go see someone so and so in person and talk to them in order to believe that that person got the message or anything like that. Like Bernie said, it's not assignment, it's alignment. So that is important. There are all those different elements. So as you evaluate culture, as you evaluate technology and the processes that you have, and you see that you could possibly try it, then it's trying little by little. The way we did it is we started with 1 day remote. So everybody in our team was allowed to work 1 day remotely. And we saw how that person performed remotely. Was a person having problems? Is that kind of person that you gave a remote day and suddenly the person is constantly unavailable on Skype or any of the communication tools that you have, which is indirectly impacting stuff, right? Because you're trying to reach out to that person. It's impossible. You're sending an email, you get a response 5 hours later. It's like, what's going on here, right? Or it's people that is remote, but as you're interacting with that person, you just felt that the person was sitting at the office next to yours. Because remember, some of us are in offices. Unfortunately, when I get to work, I come into my office. Sometimes you have to close the door because there are some private conversations you have to have. Your team might be outside. They might not even see you. They don't even know if you're sitting in that office or if you're sitting at home. And that should be the kind of experience, right? That regardless of where you're sitting, the experience should be the same. Now, of course, when you're in office, going back to the relationships between us as human beings and all that, which is great, but no matter where you are, you got to ensure that people is able to work in either mode without impacting the work, right? And still delivering and providing the support that your teams require. So that to me is the most important thing. So start little by little, try a day, see how it works, try it with different team members. Sometimes there's people that even says, hey, this doesn't work for me. I live in a small apartment, I have 3 dogs, 2 kids, the noise, I cannot work remote. In COVID, we've seen it. We've seen people that says, when can I go back to the office? I want to work in the office. I feel like working from home doesn't work because I don't have a setup at home. I'm working from my living room or some things like that, right? So you got to make sure that it works. And for those that work, allow it. And for those that doesn't, let them continue going to office. It's not a hard fast rule that you got to do it one way or the other. It's just provide flexibility. So if you can provide the flexibility, just go for it.
Great, great. I agree with that. Bernie, what are some of the key performance indicators that you will develop to help project managers have a better understanding of the health of their projects while working in a decentralized team?
Yeah, I think, it's not just performance indicators, but again, like we touched on communication. I think while working with remote teams, communication is something that is most critical. Better to over communicate than under communicate. The other thing that I usually, help my teams is, one is I want to understand, how does this project enable the action plan for a particular business unit or cross functions? So I always want to make sure that we don't just focus on the KPIs. KPIs can be at the project level, but I want to know the big picture. How is this particular project or a combination of project and or programs or portfolios, what are those type of enablers or outcomes or key results that you're going to be deriving from that? So I don't really have a prescriptive way. I think every project should have different type of KPIs. And again, I'm not talking about KPIs at the project management level. More than anything is, at the end of the day, how are we enabling the business? Are we digitally, for me, we have an acronym called DOJO. And DOJO stands for Digitally Optimized Journey and Operations. We want to make sure that everything that we're doing from a digital transformation perspective at Modernizing Medicine ties back to enabling our business units to do the best, and is creating an experience not only for the internal teams, but also for our customers. And we want to make sure that we bring those together. So for me, is really making sure that we understand the experience internally, externally, and then that we derive whatever opportunities. So like, emotions are a big thing right now. So like one of the great things that's happening right now is user experience. We're very tied to user experience. Everything is an experience. And what we're trying to create is experiences. For us, we want to make sure that the experience that our customers have, it's really driven by the internal experience that we build in our operations for our employees. I've heard it said, happy employees make happy customers. So it's almost, things that we need to merge together. You need to just really understand the external experience, the internal experience, and what are those interceptions? What are those key points? And then from there, understand where those opportunities lies. Based on the opportunities that you have for whatever it is in the process, then you start to derive some sort of an enabler. So again, you mentioned KPIs. I've been really shifting a little bit more towards the outcomes and key results. At the end of the day, there's got to be some sort of an outcome. Are we improving a process? And if we are improving that process, are we saving time? And if we're saving time, how does that translate into dollars? And if it translates into dollars or time, how can we now leverage this to really make sure that people are working on the most important things as we're really creating a digital experience and digital transformation that suits not only the customer, but also our internal employees.
There's something you mentioned there that jogged my memory a little bit. The objectives and key results. It's one of the concepts that I was actually reading up on that Google uses to make sure that the employees are all aligned to the company objectives. So that's a good one, and I'm glad to hear that that's something that's being practiced at Modernizing Medicine.
No problem. And there is a difference. There's a difference between KPIs and OKRs.
Right.
So I think it's a great area to really dive into for those that are watching. Google searches, there's good articles out there by McKinsey. Also, Forrester has a few podcasts that talk a little bit about it. And I mean, there's just plenty of resources out there. But at the end of the day, project management KPIs, but at the same time, business outcomes and key results, and they must go hand in hand.
That's good. You said recent studies have shown that many people are actually working longer hours while working from home than they normally would if they were in their office prior to COVID-19. How do you encourage project teams to maintain a good work-life balance while still getting their tasks completed on time?
Yeah, that's part of the challenge, right? A lot of people think working from home, things are just gonna be easier, and really what ends up being is a lot more work than you believe. It's harder to disconnect. You start earlier in the day. You don't have to commute. You wake up, have your cafecito, boom, sit down and start working. And your day might go by, especially now in the midst of COVID. You're doing all these virtual meetings, all these Zoom meetings. You're just back to back to back. When you realize it's 6 p.m. and then you have another list of things to do, and you just keep connected. So it's very hard to disconnect. Some of the things that we're doing to communications is we have done things like putting videos in our connect page that helps people disconnect by an hour in your calendar, company-wise, whomever wants to go subscribe to that hour can, and we do some stretching. So it allows you to stretch because it's important that you're not sitting. A lot of us don't have like ergonomic chairs at home for work. So it's good that you stand up and stretch. The other one is there was an article that we're reading in our company last week around Zoom meetings and how much it drains people, right? Because you're just looking at this blue screen constantly. There is people with different backgrounds. You're trying to focus your eyes in that screen all the time. That can, also drain you very low. So what we're trying to do is generate these different spaces and promote them to the teams so people find ways to disconnect throughout the workday and just take 5 minutes break where you can. We're promoting that. Try to have lunch with your family if everybody's at home, disconnect during that time. And also make sure that you have a time in the day where you're disconnecting, like if you were in the office. And what happens in the office is that you see most people start leaving. So you sometimes realize, oh, it must be 5, it must be 6. When you're at home, there's no one that is gonna leave. It's just you working. So, either work out on a schedule with your wife or the person that you're living with, if you live with someone. So ensure that there is a reminder of, there is an end to the day, to the extent possible, because it really is a fact that we all work more when we work remotely, and it's just on us and finding ways to ensure that we're blocking our calendars and putting place orders out there to disconnect for beats, so we ensure mental health throughout this stage.
That's great. Bernie, before I jump to the next question for you, do you have any suggestions that you can provide as far as that, on how people can prevent themselves from working way longer hours than they normally would if they were in an office location?
Sure, Fred. And I'm very fortunate to work for Modernizing Medicine. I do have to say that they're very focused on our employees. I mean, we have an entire department that is really all about employee engagement. And during this COVID situation, one of the things that we've seen, as a nation, as a global thing, is that we are working harder from a remote perspective. So there's a few things that you've seen different companies doing. One of the things, we got an email from our CEO just a few weeks ago. And he was just basically saying, hey, guys, we know that, burnout is a real thing. There's a lot of things going on. And, so we want to give you half a day off, choose it, talk to your manager, let them know where it is, and then go ahead and check out. So that's one way. One is acknowledging that it is an issue and that the organization is well aware of that issue and that you're going to protect your employees. Another thing that our employee engagement team has done is they've actually put together there's this thing called Moments of Calm, and they put it on our calendars, and it's an opportunity to basically have meditation-led type of sessions that you can actually kind of like relax. And those are some of the things that we're doing in the new normal. One of the things that I do personally with my teams is I'm always asking, how are you doing? Do you feel like you have too much on your plate? Is there anything that I can do or anything that we can redirect? We have daily stand-ups. What did you do yesterday? What did you do today? Is there any obstacles in your roadblock? So I think it's a really important thing, not just to put it on the employee. Again, we're all going through this transition, as a humanity. So for us, it's really just making sure from a leadership perspective, we have to be looking out after our employees. We have to be asking the questions. We can't assume that they're okay just because they're not saying something. I mean, we see a lot of people that, unfortunately, depending on how you are, maybe it's hard for you to say no. And you just keep saying yes. And you're also in the midst of like, if I say no now, like, is my job in jeopardy? So you have to also just provide an opportunity to to employees, just to let them know, like, hey, it's okay if you're drowning, just let me know, and I'm going to be here to support you. At the same time, making sure that they have a practice. So like for me, you know, one of the things that's been really important is just making sure that I be disciplined in my life during this transition. There's different things that I used to do in the past, you know, different discipline practices that don't apply anymore. You know, I miss the walk from meeting to meeting now. And like Yuset was saying, it's like we're jumping off a call and jumping on to the next call. And before you know it, you know, the day's gone, it's 6:30, 7 o'clock, and now we have like this pile of things or follow-ups that we need to do. So making sure that you're also putting in, I tell them, put blocks in your calendar. If not, you're really going to bring this pile of work on top of yourself, and you're not going to be able to get under it because more will come. So I think it's a balance that you have to have. You know, one is reminding your employees to make sure that they're disciplined, that they create whatever outlets are important to them. You know, I love to get up. I block my mornings because I want to go out and go for a run and just clear my mind, come back, and I want to have, you know, breakfast with my daughter and my wife. I want to make sure that I spend that time. And then after that, I'm getting on to business. And I know that by lunchtime, unless I block my lunch, a meeting will get thrown on there. So I will have to act. So it's just really just creating those habits. Burnout is a real thing. I mean, you guys saw Google, gave an entire day off also to some of their teams. So, you know, I think it's just really making sure that employees feel that, you know, you're looking out after them, that they're also accountable for creating the best practices that apply to them to make sure that they have those boundaries. And that they're able to really make sure that they have that good balance between family, between whatever their extracurricular activities are, and work. I feel like once you start burning people out, people are really busy. You know, another quirky quote is, you know, just because you're busy doesn't mean that you're being productive. You know, so don't confuse busyness with productivity. So it's a matter of making sure that you have that balance, you have those guardrails, and that you're constantly aware. Because sometimes those boundaries will get violated, and you might be the violator of those boundaries as well. So it's just constantly even doing some self-reflection. Is there anything that I can adjust? Keeping your priorities in order as well. When you have like 20 balls up in the air, you need to understand, like, you know, everything should be one through whatever that priority is. So making sure you're providing priorities to your teams as well. You know, at the end of the day, when everything is priority, nothing is really priority. So it's really making sure that you're working on the right things at the right time, but creating a good work-life balance for yourself, because ultimately that's going to make you more effective.
Right. And for viewers, I think those are very important aspects that they mentioned, suggestions that we can all apply on how we work remote, and making sure we take some breaks, make sure you have discipline so that you block off your calendar so that you have time to spend, at least to recharge and, you know, be with your family members and so on and so forth. Those are really good suggestions. So I appreciate both of you guys for going in depth on that suggestion. A lot of us here are affected by that. I know for one, I do work a lot, and I know a lot of people that are watching this webinar right now can agree to that. So thanks a lot for that feedback. Bernie, so this is your question. The global research firm Gartner just came out with a study this year that claimed 80% of today's project management tasks will be eliminated by 2030 as artificial intelligence takes over. So two-part question for you. Number one, what role do you see artificial intelligence playing in the world of project management? And the second question is, what changes would you recommend to future project managers based on this outlook?
Thanks, Fred. Yeah, so, you know, what I have to say about project management and artificial intelligence for project managers out there that sometimes get nervous about, like, oh, 80% of my job is going to be automated. You know, embrace it. You know, it's coming, it's here. I actually look forward to AI. AI is going to help you to do a lot of things. You know, one of the things is you're going to be able to project, you know, and forecast with a lot more accurate. You know, as you have algorithms and machine learning, project schedules can really be evaluated. Even individual user profiles can be evaluated to understand, hey, you know, this individual missed the task, you know, 20 times over the last year. Made that a calculation into your project schedule. It's now more realistic. So I think some of the things that we could do is just make sure that we are, now there's another statistic you just brought up this report, but there's another statistic that came out where it talks about like 50% of a project manager's role or time is really spent on a lot of doing reports and schedules, follow-ups, check-ins, all these great things. a lot of things like, think of all the follow-ups that a project manager will do for one project or multiple projects. It takes time to, whether it's writing an email, whether it's, an automated update request from your PPM tool, whatever it is. At the end of the day, if those things can be automated, what AI is going to do is actually allow the project managers to have more time to spend on those type of tasks that really necessitate the most focus. So I think, we don't have to worry about project management tasks being taken over. I think we actually should be welcoming that, and it's going to enable us to be more effective. The one thing that it's not going to really automate or take away from is the human aspect, right? At the end of the day, we're still humans. We, interact, rely on connections. I don't think there's going to be an AI bot out there that's going to ask me how my daughter's, birthday party went last week, or things like that. So those are some of the things that you continue to do. You're not going to be able to build relationships, but you will be able to really focus on the things that matter most. And there was a second part to your question, Fred, and if you don't mind just asking that question again, just as a refresher.
Yeah, so the second question was, what changes would you recommend to future project managers based on this outlook on artificial intelligence taking over?
Yeah, so my recommendation is don't wait until these practices and these ideas and these, particular, desires come to fruition and then dictate your job and how you're going to do your job. But be actively involved, go out there. And I mean, there's so many different groups in the artificial intelligence space that are actually now really bringing in different type of focus groups. You see it for healthcare, you see it for fintech. There's one, actually PMI has an entire group that's now really studying this, and partnering with organizations across, the globe to really understand how can we actually have proof of concepts that really prove this type of, particular ideals, but just get involved. Be a contributor to how AI is going to help us and embrace it. That's, for me, it's just embrace it, because it's not going away. It's only going to predominantly dominate more and more. And what we could do is just, learn, what am I going to do with it, of the extra bandwidth that I'm going to have, and how can I leverage that to bring project success? I believe that projects are going to be able to be delivered quicker. I believe that we're going to be able to have a better understanding of forecast, predictability, key metrics. I think that follow-up tasks will be automated. I can definitely see a bot, just looking at, screaming through a project schedule and reaching out to Joe Blow, who has an upcoming task that is due by the end of next week, just to pulse check on that. PM is not involved in that, but you can gather all the intelligence, all the data, and use that to your advantage so that you can properly navigate and manage that project towards a successful completion.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. You said, I'm actually curious to know, what's your outlook on the role AI is playing in project management from your perspective?
Yeah, I agree with Fred, with what Bernie was saying. If you think about it, a lot of those routine tasks and routine activities that PMs might have to do that become just administrative work, right? They're required. They're not necessarily the most value add activities that our function delivers. They're just things that have to be done. But that in the end, just take time away from you, sometimes to even focus or doing the most important things. And that's why some of those activities in many organizations are just forgotten. People say, oh, I forgot to update this, oh, I forgot to do this report, because I've been focused on this or I've been focused on that everybody agrees brings more value. So it's like, okay, listen, we understand the values here, you're focusing on that, but let's catch up to this. If we get AI and automation to help us with all that, fantastic, welcome, right? In the end, it also depends on the methodology or the approach your organization is following. So a lot of us, right, who are in the midst of a transformation in our organizations from traditional waterfall to being safe or scale agile or agile or scrum, right? Our roles as PM is changing. We're going from being in our organization, we're going from being an enterprise project and portfolio management office to being an agile enablement office. And a lot of our PMs are going from being traditional PMs to being coaches, to being servant leaders, to being in roles that help, bridge the gap between business and technology, help people have better communications amongst them, communicate visions, align roadmaps, align on value streams, deliver things that we haven't been focused on for so long because everybody has been more concerned about have you checked all the lists on that project plan. I can check all the boxes you want, but if there's something wrong that no one's paying attention to, that project is gonna go off the rails. So I think if we get automation to help with all that, fantastic. Welcome, and it's not gonna put anyone's job at risk. It's just gonna help make our lives better. And as someone said here on the chat, you know, human relationships, unlike Bernie said, there is no AI bot that is gonna replace that. That is gonna go create relationships for the organization, for the department, for the specialty projects that you work on. And the knowledge that you build through those relationships, right, that can help you excel at your next deliverable. So there is a lot of transformation taking place, and today we apply tools like ServiceNow, right? And every time we go through a release or we work with them, all we're looking for is, can you take this task of 100 things that we do manually and just automate it? Give us the scripts for that. I don't want my PMs having to do any of that work. I want all of this, even their status report, once they provide key inputs, to get a simple report out that can be organization-wide ready, instead of having someone having to rewrite it in Word or Excel or whatever other tools. So you wanna welcome that, and I think it's just to our benefit.
And that's good. And the thing that actually opens up a lot of people's mind based on this study is that if you think about 10 years ago, there was things that we were doing 10 years ago in the project management space that today nobody's doing that. This article talks about in 10 years from now, in 2030, 80% of all the work done by project managers will be eliminated. A key example right now, some of our clients that we have already utilized robotics process automation, and this automates a lot of these things that not only project managers do, but also some other areas of operation within different companies. So we are already seeing that from an artificial intelligence perspective, and it's only going to get, grow and get bigger and bigger as time goes by. And I think you both hit the nail on the head, with the example that you provided.
Yep.
Bernie, the next question is for you. What are some of the best success factors that you can share with us on how to effectively manage a remote project workforce? I know we've talked about how people that work remotely can, do their best to get better at what they do and not overwork themselves or spread themselves thin. But from a leadership perspective, how can you effectively manage a team that's fully dispersed and everybody's working remote?
Thanks for the question, Fred. I'm huge on this concept of handshakes. And obviously in a COVID-19 world, I'm not talking about physical handshakes, but, I'm talking about, making sure that, everyone is, sometimes we go to these meetings and, we provide direction, and just because we say something, it shouldn't really translate into that other individual understood, what they are tasked with. So I'm huge on making sure that there is a solid handshake between the expectations of project team members and the commitments. So I love sometimes, explaining a task that I think needs to happen, making sure that there's a clear owner, and then making sure, you actually ask the question, like, how do you understand the task? Just to make sure that I'm clear. Can you let me know kind of like the approach you're going to take, or what is it that you think you need to do? I know that sometimes that might seem like a I got it type of question, like you don't, but I think it's fundamentally important making sure that that's also being heard. Now, the power of repetition also, as the team is hearing something more than once, it's more likely to actually happen in accordance with the actual direction that is being given. So I think it's really important to make sure that communication is something that takes place, that you have those solid handshakes, that you have clear expectations. And you also have to make sure that you have a good solid process that the whole team understands and agrees on. So project communication, how often do they come out? Is there anywhere that I can go and self-serve myself to see if I have any open tasks? Like, how do I know when I come in and when I don't? Sometimes we also have this thing where we have core project team members, but then there are other stakeholders, and in discussions with core team members, you're like, oh yeah, that's that department, they'll take care of it. But in reality, we're not even counting that department, or making sure that those type of communication handshakes actually took place, reeling those individuals in, and just making sure that everybody knows where they're going. I look at this, so I love team sports, right? And I think everybody, in a team has a position, a function. And, if I'm the quarterback, I'm not going to go out for a pass after the, the hiker, hikes the ball. If I did it, I'm going to fail my entire team miserably because I was not exercising my function. So I think the roles, the responsibilities, the handshakes, and then making sure that there's a good project cadence of how you're communicating, those are all very important things that need to take place. And going back to that statement that I said before the ship leaves the dock, and as one of the participants was bringing up, just making sure that those expectations are clear, they're understood, and they're acknowledged and owned. Ownership and accountability is another thing. A lot of the times project managers are working with individuals that 90% of their job might be operational, and 10% of their time is actually being committed to this. What happens when the operational demand exceeds the allocation that they have for projects? You really start to get into a situation where you might potentially have some project failures or some project misses. The project might go off the rails. So that's why communication, I think, is one of the important aspects that needs to take place, particularly more in a situation where, we're 100% remote.
That's great. Thanks for that. You said I'll ask you maybe the last questions, and then we'll see if we can go over some Q&A so that people in the audience can at least get some of the questions answered. You said one of the reasons why some project managers struggle is because they are normally afraid to ask for help. What suggestions can you provide to help project managers overcome the fear of asking for help, particularly if, number one, they have a huge workload, and number two, if they are trying to navigate challenges within a project?
Thank you for the question, Fred. I think in the world that we live in today, in the midst of change that is happening out there, I think all companies and leaderships are focused on what we call psychological safety. We as leaders are responsible for providing psychological safety to our teams and to the workplace and the environment in which we are performing as a team. That will open the space for people not to be afraid of asking questions. I think there is a lot of a big move into empowering the teams, making sure that the teams are the ones driving the work, and you achieve that by, as I said, empowering the team, but through sharing with them what is the vision, what are the objectives that you're trying to achieve as an organization, involve them in the process, making them feel be part of the process. As you do that, they will not have a fear of speaking out or sharing their opinions, which are extremely valuable. If you promote a culture where it's more of a task-driven culture where you just assign people stuff without telling them the whys, right? Like Bernie says, assignments with no alignment, then that's where you encounter those issues. Because people just focus on a task. Oh, I gotta do task A. What does task A do? I don't know. Why is it important? I don't know. I just know that someone told me that I have to do it and I have to have it done by tomorrow. That's the worst thing you can do. It's better to tell someone, we're trying to deliver these outcomes for our clients. We're trying to deliver this customer experience. We're having to deliver this client journey. And by doing this project or this initiative, we're gonna achieve that by this. And then people can actually take ownership and pride on the work they're doing because they're aligned to what the organization is doing. And they will come forward to you, to your stakeholders, to the product owners, to their leads with ideas, with risks that maybe you're not seeing, but that they're in the ground, see sometimes more than what we can and expose it. So a lot of communication is important. And as I mentioned, create an environment where people feel that they have psychological safety so they can speak up, and be truthful and transparent about their projects and the things that they're working on. That to me is key.
That's great. And Bernie, same question, but for you, you spoke about emotional intelligence. From a leadership perspective, how do you ensure that you will allow project managers that are not so outspoken to speak up so that their concerns are heard and they don't take on a lot of work? You give the example of a lot of people, are afraid to say no and they take on more responsibility. How do you encourage them to be able to say, I can't take on any more responsibility. I have a lot of work on my plate as it stands. How do you do that?
I think it's an open dialogue all the time, so I have weekly one-on-ones with every single one of my team members. And I'm constantly, a lot of the teams, I start out a conversation with, how are you doing? Is there anything that I could do? How's your capacity right now? How's your bandwidth? I usually have a sense of where they're at. And a lot of times, for those individuals that might not necessarily tell you, and they just take on more and more and more and more, that's a great coaching opportunity. You can come in and say like, hey, I noticed that you have multiple initiatives in your plate right now, and these are very critical. They're strategically aligned. They're moving okay, but I know we're going to hit some peaks and valleys. And we know how projects work, right? Sometimes it's the calm before the storm. Sometimes it's, the peak at the midst of execution. So I think it's just always having an open dialogue. But I really believe that when it comes to individual, it's first the responsibility of the leader to make sure that you're looking out after that employee. And trust me, employees that are overburned or burning out, and they really just have so much on their plate, if their manager is not looking out for them and they're just letting it happen just because you just want to crank through work, that individual will eventually leave the organization because you will get them to a burned out state. And nobody wants that. Every time an individual walks out of the door, that intellectual capital walks right out the door with it. It's going to take time to find somebody, to interview, to make sure. So I always think of these things as I'm having this discussion with my teams is how can I be a support system for them? But at the same time, and then I would challenge them, are you sure if you're going to take on this? Are you sure you can take it on? And sometimes, unfortunately, situations have to happen where you might come back and it's like, well, let's have that discussion again, because when we originally had it, you thought you could, but maybe, we didn't really think through it properly. So what can we learn from that situation? And how can we make sure that we don't end up in that position again? So I think ultimately for me, it's just one is your resources have to know that you're looking out for them. They have to know that you have their back. They have to know that, this is where the emotional intelligence comes in. I think it was Erin Bella, one of the participants in the webinar, she brought empathy. Yeah, and I think we're talking about the AI discussion, but I think focus on your emotional intelligence skills. Make sure that people understand, one is that you're self-aware of your own items, that you regulate yourself. And at the same time that you're also making sure that you're empathetic, that you're caring for them. When an employee feels like you're caring for them, they're going to do a lot more for you than if they don't feel like you're caring for them and looking out for them. So I mean, for me, that emotional intelligence and making sure that at the end of the day, we're all in the same boat. If we succeed, we're going to succeed as a team. If we fail, we're going to fail as a team. That's my own military background. But at the end of the day, understanding that nobody is as smart as all of us together. And if we bring our issues, our challenges, we can self-organize ourselves to make sure that we have good project success, good predictability, and that we're not really burning everything out. You touched on the why. I'll just chime in. That is extremely important. I mean, I think that that's one of the things that, maybe about 5-7 years ago, Simon Sinek came out with The Why, the book. It's a great, for those of you that are not familiar with Simon Sinek, I encourage you, just, go out there, do a Google search, and just, he's got one of the TED Talks that he just nails it. People need to understand why is what I'm doing important to this project. People, when they understand the importance of their work, and how it ties back to the overall objectives and the goals and the success, they're going to be a lot more engaged and a lot more excited. Ultimately, you want them to be excited about the work that they're doing. It was I heard a great quote that's saying that, leadership is getting somebody else to do something you want done because they want to do it. So that's when the inspiration, they're getting them pumped up, the excited, the connecting the dots, it's incredible, and people will go, they will move mountains for you when you really focus on them, when you give them the why, but when they make sure that you're looking out for their well-being as well.
Great. And one last question for you, Yuset. I know we've run out of time. You said this is a question from an anonymous attendee. The question is, do you think the project methodology correlates to AI adoption within project management? If so, which methodology can leverage AI support more or less? So they're asking us about the project methodology, which one better correlates to AI adoption?
I think that AI adoption in general, I wouldn't correlate it with a project methodology per se. I think it can benefit, of course, things like a waterfall, mainly because how prescriptive the model is, where in Agile, you're being, you know, uh, you're working more on a changing plan. You're working on a smaller cycles of time. You're iterating every 2 weeks or every 2 weeks versus in Waterfall, you might have a project plan that takes you a year to 6 months, depending on the implementation, that can have multiple lines in there that require a lot of tracking. However, there are things even within a Scrum or Safe that can benefit from AI. Things like time tracking for the resources, because you need to get reporting around that. The activities that are getting completed, how to generate maybe automatic status reports based on the work that the Scrum teams are doing that can go directly out to the product owners. So it really depends on what methodology you're using and what are the things that you consider routine activities that you can get the most benefit out. But always look at what are those routine tasks, the low value tasks, right? That as we've been talking, do not require necessarily empathy or emotional intelligence or all these different human aspects that we talked about. That is where you want your research to focus. The things that are very simple or routine to be done, try to put AI through all of those, and that will make your overall organization more efficient.
All right. Thanks a lot for that, Yuset. And I think we only have 1 minute. I know we could keep going and going. There's a lot more questions, but we're not going to have time to cover all of that. So I want to thank you, Bernie and Yuset, for your attendance today. This has been really wonderful. And also thanks to all the participants that were sending in all the questions and also for attending this webinar today. We actually have our next webinar. It's going to be on the 11th of this month with 2 panel CEOs. We have healthcare CEOs. That's actually this coming Thursday. So be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn and register for all our future webinars. That's all for today. So thanks a lot, everybody, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Fred, and thank you, Bernie.
Thanks
Take
all.
care, Yuset. Bye.